Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to ConCOVE's first webinar of the year, the Bystander webinar, Eliminating Harassment and Fostering Safer Workplaces. Ko George Makapatama ahau. I'm the Deputy I'm the Deputy Director of ConCOVE Tuhura. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our kōrero. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, ConCOVE is the Construction and Infrastructure Centre of Vocational Excellence. We focus on research projects that drive long-lasting change, aiming to solve issues in the construction and infrastructure sectors through vocational education. Today, we are excited to share insights from the Bystander Project, an initiative rooted in ConCOVE's commitment to addressing critical barriers for women in male-dominated industries. Now, let's take a moment to acknowledge the reality. Sexual harassment is one of the key reasons women leave the sector. Hostile work environments, bullying, family unfriendly workplaces, and non-gender neutral equipment are just some of the barriers preventing greater participation by women in the industry. Despite efforts to diversify, the sector's gender makeup has seen little improvement since 2015, and this is from the Waihangarara research. And the Human Rights Commission in 2022 highlights that 30% of women have experienced sexual harassment in the last 5 years. 30%. To drive change, we're introducing ConCOVE's On Site Upstanders, tauiwi, and Te Maru o Hine, kaupapa Māori theories of change. The research framework's designed to create workplace cultures where all genders can thrive in the construction and infrastructure sectors. So after today's session, we hope you will gain some clear understanding of the theories of change, insights into what the sector needs to do to support meaningful change, and knowledge of the capacity and capability required to make the shift. There will be a moderated Q&A at the end, like any good webinar, and the recording will be made available afterward. If you have a question, please submit it in the chat, and we will address this during the Q&A. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Dr. Suzette Dyer from the University of Waikato, and Dr. Joni Angeli Gordon Ngā Puhi, Ngāti Whatua, Te Roroa, from Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. I'm going to pass the raka over to you, Joni, to start us off, and then we'll continue with Suzette.
Pai, tēnā rawa atu koe maka tāpatama, e rere atu nei ngā mihi ki a koe, I tau hakatuwhira I tēnei o ngā kaupapa nui haka hirahira, he uri ahau no te taito kerau, no ngā pi no Ngāti Whātua, no Te Roroa. Yes, I am Joni Angeli Gordon. I am a Senior Research Fellow at Te Manawa Haukura Research Centre at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. And I'll pass it over to you, Suzette.
Kia ora. Thank you, Makapata, for the invitation to be here. I'm, of course, Suzette Dyer Aho, and I am a Senior Lecturer at University of Waikato, and along with Fiona Hurd, I led the Upstander or Bystander tauiwi Theory of Change project.
Well, thank you both again for joining us today. Let's warm us up. And to you, Suzette, what's the On Site Upstanders tauiwi Theory of Change about, and why is it important for this project?
So the tauiwi project sought to capture women's experiences of working in the construction and infrastructure sector, and it was based on their experiences. We tried to figure out how we would move towards creating a safe and environment, an inclusive environment for women in these places of work, their places of work. So the importance of it is that everyone should feel safe and feel valued at work. And if we start to think about that, we know that when people feel safe and valued at work, it improves their well-being, but it also meets many United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It also helps the industry achieve the goals that they have already set in place to make to address some of the issues that the theory of change looked at. and we also know that it helps make these industries a viable career of choice. You can stay there because you feel safe there. And when you bring all of those things together, you see that the cost of doing business can be reduced, and especially as it relates to absenteeism and turnover of staff. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora. Joni, can you also tell us what the Te Maru or Hine theory of change is about?
So what it's hoping to achieve is really the very same thing that the tauiwi model is hoping to achieve too, but it comes from a place of centering kaupapa Māori at the very heart of the theory of change. It draws on mātauranga Māori, it draws on Māori voice to be able to look at what those changes are. We know that Māori occupy a significant number of those within the industries and sectors. So looking at how a Māori way of doing and being could support change in the sectors was a key priority of our particular theory of change.
Kia ora koro. Thank you for setting the scene, Suzette. Coming back to you, could you explain in more detail what the theory of change is and how it applies to fostering safer workplaces?
Okay, so a theory of change is a process that's designed to help us move towards positive change, and especially when you're dealing with really complex situations. So not only is the industry complex, but the issues that this theory of change is focusing on are very complex as well. Lots of moving parts. So a theory of change tries to bring together stakeholders who are related to the issue that you're trying to address in some way, whether they're directly affected by it, you're an institution who's required to manage it, or and alongside those people, you might be also responsible for implementing the change. You want to bring all of those people together, and what you want to do from bringing those people together is get them to describe what the current state is. So like they're the ones living in it. So what is it like? Then get them to articulate, what do they want to live in? So what is their future aspirations? And then the third part is how do we get there? So if we're here, how do we get to there? In terms of I want to acknowledge the significant amount of work that has already been done in this space. And from that work, what we do find is it's really hard to create and sustain well-being within these environments. And it's because they're so complex. It's because we're dealing with the issues cross organisational boundaries. They cross work sites. They involve individuals. They involve co-workers. There's leadership involved. We know that the actual industrial competitive environment, which is shaped by legal infrastructure as well. All of these things, along with pre-employment education and training, all come together to advance or sometimes what we want to achieve. So when we take those backgrounds into our theory of change, we did bring key stakeholders together. So we had organisational, like sector organisation representatives, we had public sector representatives, we had gender harm experts, and we had individual tradeswomen come to talk with us. And by bringing these incredible people together, they did describe what they were seeing, what they were living. They came up with the end goal was make construction and infrastructure the place to work, a safe place to work. And as part of that, they started to think about, well, how would that happen? And they created timelines, they created indicators that would prove that change was occurring, and they identified particular areas where they thought change could occur. So there were multiple areas where they identified needed work,
Well, thank you for that was very comprehensive in regards to the mahi that's gone into bringing this together. Joni, over to you. Can you expand on the kaupapa Māori lens of the theory of change and its significance in this particular context?
So the kaupapa Māori theory of change applied kaupapa Māori principles to the design of the research. So the interviews and the survey that we put out were underpinned by that, and we were able to collect kōrero from a range of stakeholders, from leadership through to people that are, in those positions within the construction industry that can be affected by it, and pull that together into something to really capture what the key issues were, what they felt were the challenges, and then frame the findings of that within a kaupapa Māori lens that drew on mātauranga Māori, that really encouraged looking at the mana and tapu of women and what that looks like, and as well as at the mana and tapu of tāne as well. And so thinking about that, how do we create something to bring about change when we're aware of those issues? And then how do we move it into a place where we can see that meaningful change, that change of perspective around women and how we care for them in these environments.
Nice. As we sort of start to get deeper into what this actually means, as you said, what does the sector then need to focus on to support meaningful change through the theory of change?
So from our theory of change, there was quite a few areas identified that could support positive change. So I'm just going to look at a couple. So one of the starting points was that the industry needed a common ground language. So as Joni was saying, so that we could have an understanding of what is, for example, what is sexual harassment, so people would understand that. And then moving into developing collaborative ways for the sector to come together and work together to make positive change. And one of the areas at a specific area that was identified was the role of education and training, and whether that, and in terms of training for civility. So it kind of builds on that change of perspectives. How do we help people change these perspectives? And this kind of idea of training and education ran through from pre-employment education to on-site training programs, as well as the toolbox sessions. But one of the key things was to ensure that training was evidence-based, so that when people are going to training, it's actually backed up by evidence that actually this will lead to a positive change, rather than So as a part of that, as such a strong theme, we're starting to talk with ConCOVE about how we might develop a second level theory of change in and around what would good training look like.
Yeah, nice. We won't disclose all of the good stuff we've been talking about behind the scenes, because we've got a lot to talk about today. So there's a nice segue in to you, Joni, then. What capacity or capability do organisations need to have in place before they can successfully implement the theory of change?
I think organisations really need to have a clear idea about where they are. They need to have a picture of what their particular organisation looks like, the makeup, the issue that they have there. If there are pockets of sexual harassment, if these things are happening, you need to have a really clear idea about what that looks like and the nuances of it in your particular situation, so that you can imagine what the ideal is for the future. So if you can imagine, if you had an organisation that was free of sexual harassment, that was safe and not hostile, then what does that look like? And then understand that the response to that runs across the career stages, from training through to leadership, through to people that are right in the centre of the mahi that needs to be done. So throughout all of that, there needs to be systems and reinforcement happen with a clear aim about what you're wanting to achieve at the end.
Yeah, kia ora hoa. Well, Joni, one of the things that I picked out from Te Maru or Hine is this notion of tāne allyship, yeah? Could you please explain to us the concept of tāne allyship and its role in creating inclusive workplace culture, building the culture? Yeah,
that was something that came through incredibly strongly in a lot of the kōrero that we gathered for this kaupapa Māori research project, was the idea that we needed tāne allies. So in order for things to change, we know that these industries are male dominated presently. So in order to change behaviour, we need tāne to stand up and to create environments where it's possible to. How do we create environments to do that? In Te Reo Māori, the word for allyship is haumitanga, and an ally is a homie. So that's a really cool concept to think about in terms of tāne allyship and getting tāne to be good homies for the women that are on their sites. And so creating that environment is the mentorship that exists there. How do we get the leaders on board, and through it, how do we reinforce it in a way that means that tāne know what to say, that they have the right things to do, that there's a shared expectation for how we treat each other, how women and men treat each other in these environments.
Kia ora. One of the things that was really important for us for ConCOVE and working with you both is the mana of both of these projects. It was really, really important for us to ensure that we place them in its rightful places and they each have mana. So within that though, what are the unique aspects and similarities between the tauiwi research and Te Maru o Hine theories of change? And how do you both see these approaches complementing each other and fostering safer workplaces? Suzette, I'll come to you.
Thank you. I think what we have noticed is that both of these projects really show that incivility is shared, and it's shared across construction. And some of the unique aspects and the similarities are is that there's a real desire to change that shared incivility. Like that there is a real strong desire to actually be able to go to work and feel safe and get on with your job. And I think the two projects really complement each other in that regard, that they highlight this sharedness, but actually it also that to address it may require unique responses. And I think that's really, really powerful to actually to understand that even although there is a shared experience, it might require different responses. Joni?
Yeah, I agree. So we're wanting to achieve the same thing, obviously, and so there are lots of similarities, and then there's some things that are a bit different. The thing that I really love about the tauiwi model is looking at the whole industry. The way that the tauiwi model gathered voice meant that there was a range of voices in there, whereas the kaupapa Māori was a little bit more nuanced. It took on a particular lens to find a response and to find a solution to this problem. I think a lot of the elements of the kaupapa Māori theory of change are quite practical on the ground, really centred on the day-to-day work within the industry. And the beauty of the tauiwi is that is a really wider systems change policy element to it as well. So they both work well together, and in combination they can be really powerful, I think.
Yeah, thank you both for reaffirming that the approach that we've taken has really supported unearthing these taonga. And this is as we approach the end of our webinar, we've covered the importance of theories of change, sector needs, organisational capacity, and tāne allyship. My final question is for both of you. What are the next steps organisations can take to implement these changes, right? Because after all the efforts and the voices and the aspiration of the people who participated, including yourselves who drove this with us, what do they actually, end up to be? What's the meaningful change? And on the individual level, what role can we each of us play in supporting this transformation? Again, I'm going to start with you, Suzette. Over to you.
I think I'd like to reiterate what Joni has already said. It's at the organisational level, start with an assessment. Like what is going on in your organisation, and what are the key elements that that organisation needs to work on, and then start thinking about how do you change that within your organisation. And every organisation has different starting points, so it is a unique issue per organisation. At the individual level, we can actually check our own behaviour, and we can consider, is our own behaviour okay? And most of us have some kind, and if it's not, then consider, if my behaviour is not appropriate, then maybe I should try and become more appropriate. So we can think about that at that level, and I think some of us can actually call out. Or I think there are people already who can call out inappropriate behaviour. I don't think at the moment everyone can call out inappropriate behaviour, but if you're one of the people who can, then maybe that's something that you can think about. Maybe that's something you could do. Joni.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that that you can do to, right now to make a difference. I really believe that having a really clear idea about the vision of what you want your particular context, your particular organisation to look like, if it was safe, that is a really powerful starting point. And from that, then you can find the steps to get there, which is what a theory of change is, basically. It's like, how do you move from where you are now to where you want to be? And so that's what we're aiming. And within our discrete organisations, within ourselves, we have that capacity to do that. What are the sorts of things that I personally want to do, and how do I work towards building myself for that? Within organisations, strong mentoring is really important. Getting those allies in place is really important. At each level, within each team, within each leadership team, middle management, people at the top, who are those people that are champions for this kind of mahi, who are passionate about it and who have an openness to be able to lead in this space, and bring them on so that they can take on that mahi. So, people that are passionate, they're going to bring that passion into the work.
Well, kia ora kōrua, ngā mihi mahana kia kōrua ki te whakaaro me aroha for the kōrero that were taking place today. So thank you both for sharing the insights. We're not done just yet. So we're now going to move into the Q&A session. And if you have questions, as I said earlier, please submit it in the Q&A section, and I'll direct it to our panelists. But we'll get started. I think there's already things firing away there. So the first question that I want to ask, my bad, that shouldn't be happening live. How can we create ways in which women can safely report sexual harassment? That's a powerful question.
I can start.
Yeah.
It is an important question and a powerful question because it depends on where you're working, and we know that women working, the industry is quite varied. So you might be in a small business or you might be in a huge business, and so the different businesses have different capacities. Some of the things we know other organisations have done is create reporting lines. So and communicated if something is happening, these are the places you can go, the people you can see. Some organisations now have created anonymous reporting. So there are like online ways to report. Some organisations have created links to the institutions around them so that you can report to an institution rather than report internally to address maybe power imbalances already in the organisation that they're working for. So there are quite a few ways to do it, and it is an important question because we know there's so much evidence that shows that when people report or women report, they can often end up in a worse situation. So actually knowing that and making sure that it is safe to report is quite key to this whole issue, I think. Joni?
Yeah, making it easy to report and anonymous and kind of objectives, a little bit separate to your organisation, is really central there. So creating systems to be able to do that. Some of the voice that came through in the interviews that we did talked about how often women will choose their battles. So they'll often experience or hear or be privy to certain things happening, but they'll go, oh, I can't be bothered, it's too much of a... So there needs to be, so they go, okay, it's got really bad now, then I'm going to have to report it. And so we don't want situations like that. We need people to be able to be answerable for and to create those environments. So creating really robust, objective, clear, anonymous systems for people to be able to speak up is incredibly important.
Kapai, there's the next question, I think, really start to delve deep into that particular space, particularly when we talk about power. And the power to do nothing or the power to transform spaces. So this question, I think, it sort of feeds into that space. And the question that's come through is, how can leaders and managers better support a cultural change? Because you've talked before about we can all do something, but at the central place of when we talk about power, I come back to power dynamics, that's an incredibly important part of the system. So, you might want to digest it. Johnny, if I start with you.
So I think what's really important here is for leaders and managers to believe in it. So it's not a box-ticking exercise. You're wanting to do that to actually create a culture of safety and knowing also the benefits of having safe cultures economically. If you've got good places to work, then that impacts, on your ability to function really well as an organisation, and creating safe environments for everyone that you're working with. Having women within your organisation is a benefit, and so creating a space so that they're able to be in that space in safety is really important. So buying in and seeing that it's important and not a box-ticking exercise.
Yeah, and then moving from there, thinking about how you translate those aspirations into either policy, but more than policy, into action. So on how leaders speak about these issues, how they respond to these issues, how people are treated when they are confronted with these issues, either personally, like that whole process, all of these things, leaders and managers can support positive cultural change. So moving those aspirations into actions. Positive action.
Both are very, very thoughtful questions, and we've got another powerful question that has come to us. The question is there any mechanism to control sexual harassment in complex construction sites? Maybe,
I would say there's not one mechanism, but there would be like multiple layers of intervention that could occur. And we've just talked about the leadership, and we've talked about individuals monitoring their own behaviour, and we've talked about how you might report. But all of that comes down to how do we make sure that people are actually, not just leaders talking about it, but actually the workers themselves are living it, and they are also on board with that. So then when we start to look at that, there is that role of training, and there is that role of common language, whether it's haumi or whether it's not okay, whatever that language is, and there is consequences for behaviours when they do violate what is termed acceptable behaviour in your organisation. Joni?
Yeah, I think that's a real challenging one, because I think moving away from that idea of controlling sexual harassment and changing hearts and minds around it is the important thing, because when we suppress that, it doesn't necessarily go away, it's just held in. So how do we create spaces, and how do we create professional development and environments to help people understand that behaving in these certain ways isn't appropriate, and it creates a hostile environment where no one's safe, actually. Even people that are, definitely people that are watching on are also unsafe in those environments. So how do we change hearts and minds? And all of these things in both the tauiwi theory of change and the kaupapa Māori, provide really useful things to hopefully support complex construction sites across the board, across career stages, across organisations, to make that change.
Thank you. We've got they're coming through, and this one there you talked of tāne haumi, and diversity conversation it's almost always in Hine in the crowd. There seems to be very little interest from tāne kapai. What would you suggest as a way to get their participation more?
Honestly,
get them more involved.
Yeah, it's such a challenge.
Nice.
And even when recruiting for the project, tāne didn't see themselves within this lens, which I found really interesting. So I think the power of getting tāne involved is really finding ways of communicating that they resonate with. Finding ways of communicating and ways of talking about these issues that they can feel, really getting them to understand that issues, sexual harassment against women is all of our problem. It's not just a woman's problem, it's all of our problem, and we need to take it on. And it's a challenge, and we're still grappling with how to do that. How do we bring tāne on board? How do we support tāne? But I think getting those people, those tāne who within the industry that are passionate about it to really mentor and take the lead is the key. Identify those people and then empower them to really help change the culture within the organisations.
I'm really loving the continuous reaffirming of the system approach. You know, you both sort of see it as not one thing, it's a whole range of things that needs to work in unison to be able to make something really, really meaningful. They're coming through quite a bit now, there are a few questions. So there's another one there. Given the male-dominated nature of the construction industry, what specific strategies have proven most effective in combating the ingrained culture that may enable sexual harassment? And how can we ensure these strategies are implemented at every level of the industry? Did I say every level? Ka pai, because that feeds into this whole kōrero that you both sort of reaffirming time and time again. We all got to act. Nobody, we can't afford for anybody to be standing by and witnessing this and allowing this to continue. So how do we answer Suzette?
There's actually a really good United Nations report that has looked at the research in this area for the last 40 years, and it sort of brings it all together. And there are some things in there that are actually quite insightful. And when we start to think about how do we look at these really complex issues, again, it's the whole level, the whole system that needs to be looked at. Some of the things that have shown to have an outcome, a positive outcome, is actually getting language and actually identifying the behaviour that's not acceptable, but then communicating this is not acceptable behaviour and actually showing that there are consequences for inappropriate behaviour. So, and I think the research that looks at people being sexually harassed, often there's been no consequence for that harassment apart from them leaving. Or so that's been very powerful research to bring together. The other areas that have proven to be really helpful drawing from that is actually having those reporting frameworks that are supportive of the person reporting and supportive of the people that are affected by the harassment, and it's the target is the person who's been harassed, but it's everyone around them is also affected by it. So how do you support those whole processes and make people feel safe through that process as they come out the other side of that process? But it's hard, and I think these questions demonstrate how hard it is, because the questions are like, hey, we've seen it, like there is these multiple levels. But Joni, do you have?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge because there's such complexity in it, and finding a nice, find a nice clear way of combating, and finding ways of kind of decide exactly what you'd like your culture to be. And I think I've gone back to that a few times now. Have a really clear vision about what your culture is so that you know that you're working towards it, and you'll know when it's not like that. And then think about what are those things that we're moving towards, and what are those little micro steps, and then having a real good reflective process to go, oh, that didn't work so well. What's the next thing? And like allowing that space for trial and error along the way. Some things will work really well. Some things you go, oh no, we need to bin that one. That didn't work so well. And just that process of that iterative process, the using iterations to figure out the very best strategies, trying stuff, seeing how it works, modifying it, and then continuing that way to get to your vision about what you want to see.
Lovely. We do, I think, we've got a time for one more. And this one there, how does this relate to what education and training can do? Very good, very good. What I suppose you touched on these elements before as well, but
so I'm in education, so I work in a management school. So some of the things that can be done in that space is to actually raise these issues, like to say these are some of the responsibilities of managers. So it's appropriate to raise it there. So I do raise it in my courses. I know that some of the people that I have worked with have gone on to and created policy initiatives because they've learned some things that they were unaware of before. And I think that's really that whole education is not just, it's actually helping people to become aware too. And so that is one area that we do know that there is positive impact. In terms of the training space, I see no reason why this kind of information shouldn't be shared in the training spaces, because we are saying to people, this is how you do, these are the skills of your trade, but we're not necessarily saying, but this is the environment. And what we have found is that when people are confronted with the environment, it's not always safe and it's not always pleasant. So we're thinking we have a duty of care actually to our people when we're training them to say, we need you to be moving from this safe environment to that safe environment. So I think it's a crucial part of the whole. It would need to be coordinated with other work going on within as well. Joni?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that you've said there. Like the education part of the puzzle is the beginning. You know, that's where you instill it. You create the environment there. You create the culture of safety where girls or women who are in that training environment can feel safe, and you reinforce it at that level. And then the ideal is that when people come out and they move into industry, then they already have that intact. So they're not having to relearn it because there was a toxic environment within their educational context, that they're already within a safe environment. And that was one of the stories that came out actually in the research, was about a young woman that experienced sexual harassment in the education, and then she was strong enough to stand up for herself, but that's not always the case, and she had good systems to be able to deal with it. But if we can create in that early stage, in that early career stage, that opportunity, that really supports us.
Yeah, and I really love that reiteration about the duty of care, right? Yeah, it's well, when I said one more question, I mean one more question after the last question. So this question is, what are the challenges of communicating tāne allyship when pornography is prolific and shapes the way many men see women?
It's more than pornography. It's just the way women are presented in general media. So even before you get to the pornography, it's kind of, we're swimming in that environment already, and it's a challenge. There is no doubt about it. There is clear evidence between the way women are portrayed in media and pornography and so on, shaping not only how men see women, but how women think they should be. So there is those interactions there. So then we come back to that. This is not a construction and infrastructure issue. It's actually, we're just seeing it in infrastructure and construction because that's what we're looking at. It's in that broader area, and this is a very big area of how do we move from these images of women to images of women being, a human being, and
Yeah, I agree, and that was one of the big things that I kind of tried to think about, was how do we change the way that we see women, and taking on the idea of women as tapu and having inherent mana, well, all people having inherent mana, that inherent power, that, and bringing that back. So when we recognise that a woman has tapu and mana, then we're less likely to do things that inhibit that or get in the way of that. So when a woman is sexually harassed, then her tapu and her mana has been diminished. So how do we do things to maintain it and keep it direct and creating that connection? So one thing that came out really strongly in the interviews was that sexual harassment happened in this particular workplace when the people didn't have a really strong connection with everyone else. So they found if they had strong connections between and whanaungatanga and relationships, boundary relationships, then sexual harassment was less likely to happen. So creating those strong respectful working relationships is a really big priority, because once you feel a connection and you know somebody and you understand them in context of their whānau, you know who they are, then hopefully that will humanise them a little bit more, and that came through strongly.
It's a really nice sort of finishing touch, I think, in regards to the question time. And thank you again so much for the thoughtful question that has come through. And thank you again for the responding to that. And I guess on my part in wrapping that up is to a reminder to each and every one of us, and it's been threaded by both Suzette and Joni already, the importance of the system. But don't ever forget that within the system is us, people. And that's the human-centered version of, can't ever blame this on the system. It's you, it's me, and we can do something about it. And we drive the system. So thank you both for really reinforcing the questions, the messaging through the questions. So thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us today. Your engagement and commitment to fostering safer and more inclusive workplaces are what drive this very important kaupapa forward. And as a reminder, I knew I'm just moving a bit too fast here, eh? Slow down. Right, there is, a wrap-up question, I suppose, for both of you guys. And it's a really critical and builds on top of what you have been talking about in regards to what do we do with the theory of change. So it's a continuation of that kōrero. So what happens next? You know, how can we embed the findings from this research into the sector to create long-lasting, is the big word here, long-lasting impact? Joni, I'm going to start with you and back to Suzette.
I think the first thing that the sector can do is familiarise themselves with these theories of change, what's in them and what really works within your context that you can bring to life within your organisation. It's really important that we think about, the training in those parts of it. So that's a key priority, and getting the message out in a way that works. I think that idea around bringing tāne voices in to be strong allies, I think, in terms of the kaupapa Māori lens, that's really important. Which tāne voices can we bring forth?
Yeah, I agree. I think getting familiar with the concepts for a start, or the language or the behaviour, and then start to thinking about to make that change is to do something. And as Joni said, it might not work, but it has done something, and now you know that doesn't work. So now you've got options to do the next thing and do the next right thing. So I think lasting change does require individuals as well. Yeah, like how we engage with our colleagues, and how we engage with each other, how we're treated within organisations, and how we treat others within organisations as part of is the key as well. Yeah, thank you.
Look, again, thank you so much for the love and aroha that you have brought into this kaupapa. It's a very, very important kaupapa to each and every one of us for the reason that you have both shared today. So, mihia tuki a kōrua. To you, our audience, thank you for taking your time today. And I'm hoping, there's a few of you that's been in this kōrero with us, and I'm hoping we've got new people joining, coming forth in this very important kōrero, because it's just not good enough that, it's the same old us and some of us who are joining us. So please continue to bring others on this journey. And for those of you who join us for the first time, thank you so much. Just a reminder that the recording and presentation slides will be shared very shortly. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us and also the team at ConCOVE. But definitely we need to continue the talanoa, the kōrero, the conversation, and really work together to take these actions and steps in order to create meaningful change for our sector. Ngā mihi nui, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Ka kite.